Now to what became the story of last week and the sensationalist campaign commercial TV networks ran to drive it along.
Sudanese gangs caught on camera as the government shuts the door on African immigrants.
That was the opening shot in Channel 7's Melbourne News last Wednesday. The federal government had just decided not to accept more African refugees until July 2008. As arguments swirled around whether African and specifically Sudanese migrants were fitting in, 7 said it had documentary evidence of Sudanese crime gangs on the rampage.
Good evening. If you can, put racism claims aside for a moment, because tonight we can show you the terror experienced by a Noble Park shopkeeper at the hands of an ethnic gang. They've been identified by police as predominantly Sudanese youths, caught on camera stealing and striking fear into those around them.
These security camera pictures show what Noble Park shopkeepers say they're continually subjected to. Police forced to use capsicum spray after a gang of Sudanese youths decided to take over a bottle shop, fighting the staff and stealing alcohol before officers were called.
Channel 9 had the bottle shop video too.
New footage has emerged showing Sudanese gangs terrorising shopkeepers in Noble Park. Business owners are demanding more protection from local authorities, while the federal government has announced it's shutting the door to African refugees.
And 10 led with the African gang story too.
Tonight, African gangs blamed for violence in the suburbs.
One of the girls threw a bottle of whiskey at my head. If I hadn't ducked, it would have hit me in the head and probably knocked me out.
We don't believe there is a gang culture. It's a group of young people together. Other young people who are white do the same thing, and they're not called gangs.
Noble Park residents say the violence has reached boiling point, with gangs of up to 30 to 40 members roaming the streets at night, leaving many too scared to leave their homes.
Interesting, the Victorian Police Commissioner wasn't buying into talk of African gangs. Each of those stories was put in the context of the government's refugee decision.
Immigration Minister Kevin Andrews has defended the government's decision to slash the intake of African refugees until at least next July.
I'm concerned that we don't create problems down the track for this group of people and for Australian society generally.
The pictures seem to be proof for those claiming Sudanese refugees were trouble. But let's look closely at just what the stories really showed. Here's the first incident on Channel 7. In these frames, none of those involved in the violence are black Africans. We asked some members of a Sudanese community group in the area what they thought the video showed.
Actually, the guy fighting here are not Sudanese. That one is not Sudanese, that guy is not Sudanese, another guy is not Sudanese. I see only one Sudanese with a red t-shirt in this, and he's not doing anything.
So no example of Sudanese violence there then. The Sudanese man in the red shirt did have form. He'd been charged with assault, but as 7 News told us, he became a victim himself.
One of those featured in the video is 19-year-old Liep Goni, who died after being savagely bashed by rival gang members last week.
But no mention there that the 2 men charged with killing him are white. Let's look at the next incident, caught on the bottle shop tape about 6 minutes after the first brawl. When we froze the vision of the man sprayed by police, he didn't appear Sudanese either. The Channel 9 version made that even clearer. So we checked with a bottle shop manager there that night.
The man who was arrested on July 28 wasn't Sudanese. He was Islander.
And the Victorian Police confirmed this.
The offender was a Pacific Islander. He was arrested and charged with criminal offences. The group were a mix of Pacific Islanders and Africans.
But back to Channel 7's tape of supposed Sudanese gangs caught on camera. Here's another angle of the same brawl.
After a gang of Sudanese youths decided to take over a bottle shop, fighting the staff and stealing alcohol before officers were called.
Wrong again. We already know those fighting aren't Sudanese. But 7 reporter Peter Morris suggested the apparent shoplifting was part of the same gang incident on the same night. It wasn't.
That was a separate incident on a separate day.
So at the end of 7's story, all you're left with is a Sudanese man on his own allegedly knocking off 1 bottle of booze. Perhaps that's why, while his producers were positioning the story as proof of Sudanese violence, reporter Peter Morris was writing lines that sounded like he wasn't so certain.
And it doesn't matter whether it's a gang thing or an ethnic thing. The point is people feel scared around here.
Well, it does matter, Peter, when your news bulletin says quite clearly it's about Sudanese gang violence. And what about those other claims on Channel 9 and Channel 10?
One of the girls threw a bottle of whiskey at my head. If I hadn't ducked, it would have hit me in the head and probably knocked me out.
Is this, at last, the claimed Sudanese violence? Well, not according to the bottle shop manager who was the target of the attack.
The girl throwing whiskey was a different incident. She wasn't Sudanese, but she was part of the same general group.
And as for this claim from 10 News...
10 News believes a man recently entered the Springvale police station vowing to rape and kill a female officer. The federal government shutting the door on African refugees until at least July next year because of concerns about their ability to integrate.
Well, the Victorian police deny that dramatic claim.
The allegation that a man recently entered the Springvale police station and threatened to rape and kill a female police officer is completely without substance.
Another bogus allegation. Media Watch isn't saying there aren't gangs in Noble Park or that there aren't some Sudanese there who cause trouble. But the commercial network's claims to have proof of African migrant violence were dishonest. You certainly didn't see 7, 9 or 10 running this sort of opinion from locals.
I don't think it's a race issue. I think it's a gang issue. It's a gang issue rather than a race issue. Most of the Sudanese are great.
A bit more maturity and nuance there than in commercial TV newsland. It's a classic case of the commercial network's long-held obsession with so-called ethnic gangs, fitting perfectly with the political interests of those supporting the freeze on African migrants. When they added dishonesty to that mix, the commercial networks did a serious disservice to African migrants as a whole. That's it from me tonight. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next week.